Carol and Cheryl, Cheryl and Carol, Carol and Cheryl. Welcome back to Conversations with Carol and Cheryl. Today we have a special guest, Diane Bonilla. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Diane is the founder of Alma Mater Advising, and she's joined us here today to give us some advice on how to apply to colleges, especially during COVID. Is that correct, Diane?
That is correct.
Okay, so how did you get started in this?
Well, I have a background in mental health. I'm currently a licensed professional counselor in Virginia. I've been in the mental health field for 25 years, actually. And currently, I'm doing outpatient therapy with people, virtual sessions. But in addition to that, I have a business, as you mentioned before, Alma Mater Advising. That got started about 4 years ago, 2016, when my oldest and first to go to college was a senior. And at that time, we hired what's called an IEC. An IEC stands for Independent Educational Consultant. They vary in specialties. One of the specialties that they can have is college admissions. And that is what Alma Mater specializes in as well. So we did hire one, really because we were feeling a little anxious about the process. You know, your first time, you want to have every advantage. And let me be clear, this is not varsity blues or anything like that. This is paying somebody by the hour to help you find the best fit for your child. It's not about getting into the best place or anything like that. It's finding the best fit for your student. And it's very much sitting around, before COVID, sitting around the dining room table with the student, with parents, or separately, and just trying to figure out where to apply, helping them build a realistic college list, helping them with essays, helping them with the common application for colleges. So we hired this IEC to help us with that process. And I have to tell you, it really did help with our anxiety level. We felt just a little bit ahead of where we should be. When my son went to his first meeting for high school with his college counselor, he felt like he had already gotten started on what he needed to do, and it made him feel better. And we felt very current the whole time on, the whole process. So that being said, I did a lot of the researching and the work myself, even though we had hired this IEC, and really fell in love with it. I was touring campuses with my son. I was doing research, finding all these different websites, and just enjoying myself. And we did. We had a good time as much as one can during what's kind of a stressful time. And I decided once he got off to school that I was going to pursue this and do this professionally. There's an organization called IECA. It's the Independent Educational Consultants Association. And I contacted them and applied to their summer institute. And that was back in 2016. I went to Swarthmore University and was trained, and then continued to take some classes after that. And the business took off basically word of mouth. So that is where all this came from, how Alma Mater Advising was born back in 2016 for a personal reason. And my hope is to be able to help kids with this process so it's not so anxiety provoking, so they can have a little fun with it, so they can feel really knowledgeable about the process and not have to wait for someone at the high school to tell them what they need to do. They kind of already know, and it's just reinforcement when they're hearing it again at school.
How expensive is to hire somebody like that?
That really is an individual thing. So there are firms that have many IECs that work for them, and the firm sets their price. And then individually, people like me would set our own hourly rate. I'm $90 an hour. I do provide the first 20-minute consult by phone or in person. Mostly it's by phone or Zoom now because of COVID, just to see if I can be helpful to you. And if I feel like I can be after that consult, then I suggest some places where we can work together. Most of my students and families that I work with, it's sort of as needed. They call me through the year and say, I need a meeting. I'm really stuck on this. Can you come over? And I come and we sit around the table and we figure it out. Or can you review this application for us? So this area, I find people pretty savvy with the application process. So I'm just another layer of, is this a good fit? Are you showing your best self to the admissions committees? And that's kind of where my philosophy is with helping people.
So how is it different now with COVID, the whole application process?
Okay. Well, in terms of my services, of course, they're all virtual. I can use whatever application people are comfortable with. I know a lot of the kids are just comfortable with FaceTime. And so I've gotten pretty good with that, and we'll just do stuff over FaceTime. But generally speaking, if it's like a meeting with the parents and whatnot, then we use Zoom. As far as the application process, you both have been through it as parents, so you know it can be an anxiety-provoking process for these families. But on top of that, with the pandemic, there's sort of that double anxiety. We're already living with a certain level of it, and my mental health background has a lot to do with helping people with stress management and anxiety. And so I really feel compelled to today give you guys 5 things that will help you, or if you don't have a college student, if you know someone going through the process, jot these down. I feel like there's a real opportunity here if you keep these things in mind, and the process doesn't have to be so bad at all, actually. The first point I want to make about where you can really have an advantage right now is your online footprint. Kids should be really good at that right now. They're good with tech. They're good online as compared to being face-to-face with people. So I really feel there's an advantage here that way. As you guys may know, a lot of schools have gone test optional. A majority of them have. And because of that, all these other factors that we're going to cover today are going to matter more. There's going to be a lot of kids applying without test scores because they are optional, or mostly because they didn't get a good test in. Things kind of shut down. And so these things are going to be more important. So your online footprint. A lot of schools have a program. It's a tracking program. One of the more common ones is called Slate. It's tracking software that looks to see if the student is opening up the emails the school is sending. So guys, if you get an email from a college you want to go to, open it up.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, please open it up.
They should call that peekaboo.
Yeah. If you're really interested in going to the school, follow the link. Click in a few times, because the school, believe it or not, many of them are tracking how far in you go. And let me just say, all of this points towards demonstrated interest, which is what I should have said in the beginning. Showing virtual demonstrated interest is what you want to do now during COVID. And the first step is with your online footprint. How far did you click into the website? Did you open up your emails? Sign up for virtual tours. If you go on the school's website, they're offering virtual tours. Sign up for one. They are tracking that. They want to know if you've signed up. Sign up for a virtual admissions talk. If there's a question answer session, always have one question, something that you can't answer easily with a Google search, but one question that you ask. Again, believe it or not, a lot of schools will be tracking that this year. Some were doing it anyway, but more will be doing that. So again, you're just showing, I'm interested in you. I'm asking a question. I'm touring your campus. I'm opening your emails. All of that is your digital footprint. The last thing would be maybe more for a junior right now, rather than a senior, is attending a virtual college fair. All the college fairs, many of them are canceled, but they are taking place virtually. And what you do is you sign up for the school that you are interested in touring or meeting, the representatives, and then they have a whole list of things you can attend related to that school online. I have some resource information. There's an association called NACAC, the National Association of College Admission Counseling. If you go to www.nacacfairs.org/virtual, there is a sign up for virtual college fairs. The Next one that I'm aware of is October 12th. That's from 1 to 9 Eastern time. There's another one later in October on the 18th, and then there's another one in November. But again, all those are ways to show demonstrated interest. And juniors, this is a great one for you to start. Another way to show virtual demonstrated interest would be your interview. This is likely going to be virtual. It's likely going to be Zoom. It may even be at many schools optional, but I will say if you want to take advantage of showing your interest in this school, optional means do it. Okay? Optional anything means do it. It's an opportunity. An interview is an opportunity for them to get to know you a little bit more outside of the paper you send them, outside of all the paperwork. Do your homework on the school. Dig a little deeper than Google. Know about the school. And then most of all, know what you're going to offer the school. How is the school going to be better because you're living in their dorms and taking classes on campus? What do you have to offer? So if you kind of keep those things in mind, that Zoom interview is going to go really well. And then, of course, as always, I know parents, we try to teach our kids this all the time, but send a thank you email. That's another digital footprint, but it shows that you care and that you appreciate that interviewer's time. One little thing I like to do, I've done it myself before an interview, is to do the victory stance. And you do that before your camera's on, guys, okay?
Did you say victory dance?
Victory stance.
Stance.
The victory stance. So the victory stance, I know this is audio, not video, but if you can picture somebody standing with their legs kind of shoulder width apart and their hands up in the air, fist clenched, like, yeah, I did it, right? Do that for about a minute before your interview. Studies have shown that this instills some level of confidence in you. It's physiological. And interestingly enough, blind athletes who have been blind since birth, actually do this stance when they've won or achieved some kind of goal. It's innate in us. Do it before your interview, rock that interview.
Oh, okay.
Wow,
I guess that's
I
like a
love
boxer
that.
going in the ring and not throwing air punches, you know? You have to throw those air
Exactly.
punches before you go in.
Exactly.
That's great.
You
Cheryl's
like
doing
that?
the victory dance.
Yeah, I see.
I love this. This is great.
And then finally, in terms of demonstrated virtual interest, the biggest way really that you can show the school that you really want to go there is to apply there early. Early decision, early action. And I will say there have been studies that show, if you look at statistics for a lot of these colleges that offer those two admission options, your advantage is 3-1 if you do that for getting in.
Wow.
So if you want to go somewhere, apply early. And I will also say that a lot of these colleges are going to be a little more flexible because of COVID on their deadlines. It may not be publicized, but you can contact the admissions office and see what wiggle room you have if you're not ready. They're going to be a lot more flexible this year.
So the kids that you work with, do they pretty much know where they want to go and what they want to do? Or are they lost in the sauce and you facilitate direction?
A little bit of everything and then in between. I would say more times than not, kids come to me with an idea of where they want to go, and it's usually more than one place. They often don't necessarily know what they want to study. You'd get a few that do, like I want to be an engineer and I want to go to blankety blank. But for the most part, they have an idea of a pool of schools they want to go to. And so my job is to take a look at that with them and see if what that school has to offer really does match what they're looking for. You know, is it a city school? Is it rural? If the person likes to be near a city, well, how close is this school to a city? Can you hop on, the T and head into Boston? Or is it going to be hard? Are you going to have to try to find a zip car and there's only 4 for the whole campus and you can't get to Winston-Salem? We take a look at those little things that actually may be bigger things if they are on campus and discover them too late. What size classes do they prefer? If they're not happy with big auditorium size classes and they need that one-on-one, well, then let's take a look at your freshman year, how many of those kind of big auditorium classes are you going to wind up having? And is that okay? So we take a look at a lot of things. Rarely do I have somebody that's got their mind completely made up, because then it's, sort of one track heading in that direction. You do want to have a balanced application list, though, of schools that, you're going to get into, that you're likely to get into, ones that you've got a pretty good chance, and then ones that are, the name of this type of school has been changed so many times, but I still refer to them as reach schools, where your chances aren't as great as the other ones on your list, but you really want a chance at applying and going there. And if you have a nice balance of all different levels of, admission toughness, then you have a happier student in the long run. Even if they have an idea of where they want to go, I might have to balance the list out a little bit with them.
And then what about the student that starts out in a school and it's not a good fit and they need to be relocated? Would you be able to assist with that?
Absolutely. So they would be applying for a transfer, and there's a whole different set of guidelines and time frame for transfer students. But yes, I help with transfer students, and more recently have gotten into helping people with the Northern Virginia Community College program. It's a wonderful program, especially now when people do want to stay home and be closer to home, and maybe money is a little tighter. It's a great way to spend 2 years, get an associate degree, and get a guaranteed, according to your GPA, I believe, depending on where you want to go, you have to have a certain GPA, but there's guaranteed admission into the Virginia schools. And my most recent student just graduated from UVA. I started out working with her when she was at Nova and trying to get to UVA.
That's not an easy process, getting into the guaranteed, because you have to take certain classes to get into those state schools, the guaranteed, and you have to have the grade point average.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's that easy to navigate as a parent or as a student.
Right. From the time you are taking your first classes to have an idea of where you're hoping to apply, because you got to be taking the right classes.
Right. Otherwise, it's going to cost more money and take longer. Not that that's bad.
No.
And a lot of kids don't know where they want to go for their 4-year or what they even want to do. So
Right.
Starting out with those gen ed classes, just to get an introduction and get started, seems to be a way to go.
Yeah, it's a good way to just get used to being in college also, and what college academia is like. How do I study for college classes? So it's a really great way to prep for college. And really, I saw so much growth in this student over time in that few years. So, and you do get a degree from that Virginia school that you do eventually end up at. It's not about, this is a 2-year thing from UVA. I mean, you get your 4-year degree.
Right.
So it's an amazing accomplishment. Kids now with the pandemic really is an appealing option, because there's a lot of parents right now who don't know if any moment they're going to get an email that they need to go pack up their kids and come back. There's a lot of colleges that are shifting gears right now, either online in their dorms with the potential of going home or going back in person. It's a real transition time right now, and uncertain time. So going to school locally is a great way to sort of cope with that situation. And that's actually what I was going to get to next. One advantage that high school students that are applying to college right now, something they can really take advantage of, is being geographically flexible with where they look. The Higher Ed did an article back in August looking at trends after events like 9/11, after the Great Recession in 2007, 2009. And they looked at admission trends back then and are relating it to possibly what might happen for 2021, for this admission cycle coming up. And what they found is that almost 50% of college applicants were applying and going to schools locally, or at least close to home. Close to home sort of encompassed a wide range of schools, like right in your neighborhood, in your city, a few hours drive, but basically close to home. So what that means, if you have a student or know a student that's willing to look a little bit beyond a couple hours and have some flexibility, they're going to stand out in the application pool. And not to mention that maybe being a standout, they may, for geographical reasons and other reasons, be more apt to get grant aid, which is different than based on need. It's just based on purely where are you from and what you've achieved. If kids can kind of be more open-minded, I know it might be hard for some and that might not be the right fit for them. They may want to stay close to home, but if it's not something that makes you anxious to think a little bit more broadly, you'll have a terrific advantage this cycle. And they are predicting that the flagship schools will be inundated. This really is a time to look more broadly.
Do you also help with the financial aid piece?
Yes. One of the things I did before I started was I took financial aid training through UC Irvine in California, so that I could do that very thing. So I could help families with any kind of financial aid assistance that they need. It might be looking for scholarships. It might be helping them file the FAFSA, which they've made a little bit easier now. You can just import your taxes from previous tax years. It's just much simpler, but there's still always questions. And then there's also the CSS profile. I tend to work with families that, for whatever reason, tend to file that more often. And a lot of schools use their grant scholarships based on the CSS. So again, I can help with any of those things, and I can do that virtually. Sometimes it's just, needing someone to tell you, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Or if I don't know, I'll find out for you. That often is the question, because a lot of times every case is so unique and every question is so unique. And so it might mean me calling the admissions office to find out for you, or just doing some research amongst my colleagues, because we use each other for resources as well.
So what about a student that really messed up in high school and perhaps has a criminal record? They could potentially be discriminated against. Could you help a student like that to find a good fit?
Absolutely. And one thing I will say about admission committees, they are looking for progress. Having a line that's at the top of the chart straight through, that's all great. But having a line that starts from the bottom and start trending upwards in whatever it is we're talking about, behavior, academics, colleges want to see that. They want to see college readiness and they want to see growth over time. So they know people mess up. And yes, we can help with that. A lot of what will help this person in this situation would be how they're doing now in community college. And so timing might be important. Like, is there enough there to show that they are college ready? Do they need a little more time before we apply for a transfer? So again, it's a very individual thing, but there's always a solution. Every kid has strengths. My job is to help find those strengths if they don't already know where they are, and to make those shine. Are you showing your best self?
I think we're going to be in COVID for a couple of years, and maybe freshmen coming in now, this could be their entire college experience, is navigating COVID, unfortunately. I really feel bad for these kids. But I think some schools now are going to be better than others in managing this and providing a really good remote learning experience and keeping kids safe on campus if kids want to be on campus, or providing a hybrid. And it's all new. It's all new to every single school.
Right.
But do you agree with me that this is going to be the environment going forward, and that you're going to have to take this remote learning into account when you're working with new students?
I mean, of course, I'd like to think that the answer is no to that this is going to all end very soon. I think the new normal is online and hybrid. And I think that different schools have mastered that different levels. I know a lot of schools are being watched right now to see, is their way working? For example, Duke University is under a microscope right now. They have a program which involves pooled testing. They're not spending lots of money on individual testing for COVID tests for their students on campus. They're pooling, and if they get a positive result, then they're testing the kids that were part of that pool. And so that may be a way to go if that winds up working. Some schools are testing wastewater. There's all these things that are developing right now. This is the new normal, but it's going to keep changing. Mm-hmm. And I think a vaccine, as all the political pundits will talk about, and Dr. Fauci, I think that's going to change a lot of things. But until we're there, I think, Carol, you are right about this kind of being a new normal for kids. And that doesn't have to be so depressing, though. I think that as schools get better doing this, it's going to be better for the student. There's going to probably be more hybrid environment, so kids get a little bit of both. And I'm not so sure it's going to be for a full 4 years. I don't know. I don't have a predictor, but this year is a tough one to be a freshman, and schools will have done it better than others, but it's just going to keep getting better. So for this next class of seniors that are out there right now in high school, they're going to have the advantage of what these freshmen right now are doing, and what's working and what's not. So it's going to get a little better each year. I haven't discussed gap year at all with you guys.
Yes.
And so one thing that students can think about is they can apply, this senior class right now, they can apply to where they want to go. And what a lot of colleges are offering freshman class, and I assume it's going to continue in that direction, is the option for a gap year. I know of some schools that have sent their newly admitted freshmen letters. I had a student this past year that was given the option to take a 1-year gap year or a 2-year gap year with guaranteed admission at the end of that 1 or 2 years. And think about where things might be, positively speaking, 2 years from now. You might have a little bit better, I'm pretty sure you will have a little bit more in-person freshman experience, and 2 years of being able to work, find a job, take a class. I do want to caution kids on that, though, that if you are taking a gap year, find out from your admissions department how many classes you're allowed to take, how many credits, and not be considered a transfer student. You don't want to go over that credit amount, or you're going to have to reapply, and you'll be reapplying as a transfer student. And it's heartbreaking. Do not do that. So you can take classes, but just watch your credit amount that's allowed. They can work. They can take a road trip, get an RV, and head out with mom and dad. I mean, there are things to be done with a guaranteed admission down the road. If they're thinking of taking a gap year, you want to still apply to your colleges and then cross that bridge. You'll know a little bit more on decision day in the spring where the country is and where your school is that you've been accepted to.
That really is a great idea. Both my kids did a gap year, and I think it really served them. They were a little bit more mature, and after working a minimum wage job for a year, they realized I can't support myself on this. This is not a long-term solution to my life. And it really motivated them to do well in school.
I don't know of anyone who's suffered because they started freshman year a little later. If anything, they were definitely academically more mature and emotionally more mature, and it was just a good experience for them. So yeah, gap year is a great option for seniors to think about.
Especially with COVID. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. If you're worried about, I don't think the kids are worried about getting it.
Right.
Getting COVID, obviously. They think it's old. But if you're living at home with a grandparent or an elderly parent like me, that might have some preconditions, I mean, my daughter worked in a restaurant in a resort town all summer. And I just felt like I had to decootify the house every time she stepped in. And if you're that worried about it, you can do the gap year. That's a great option.
The gap year offers a lot of advantages for the students, and it's definitely something I think that will be more considered this next admission cycle. And I know that a lot of kids chose that this year because they wanted to have a more normal freshman year, was mostly their primary reason, just wanting to experience that freshman year, not in the COVID climate that we have now. I wanted to also bring up too, speaking of COVID and your own personal circumstances with COVID, the common application, which a majority of colleges use for their admissions, has included a COVID question this year. And their intent was to give kids a place to write about how COVID has affected them personally. They're not really looking for superhero stories. It's not really a place or a space to complain, but it's a place to let the admissions committee know you're human. This is where it was tough for you. Your school went online and you're terrible at online classes and your grades just plummeted because you benefit from the real in-person experience, or somebody was sick in your household, or there were too many people sharing Wi-Fi and you just couldn't study under those circumstances. It's going to be different for every person, but most kids were affected by it somehow. And again, it's optional, but I say do it. Think about it. Think about how did it affect me, and let that committee of people, they're people too, know what it is that you went through. It's 250 word max, so we're not looking at a long thing. It's not meant to be reflective. It's informational, and it's going to be in the information section. But it's something that I think kids should take advantage of and use. As an FYI, they are also including a section for your high school counselors. So every high school counselor includes a little bit about their school that it comes with your student's application, so they know a little bit about the school you're coming from and what courses are offered and a little bit about it. And there'll be a 500 word space for your counselor to sort of say, this is how our school was hit by COVID. This is how we were impacted, and this may have impacted our students. So there's a couple opportunities there, but the students should definitely take advantage of the personal COVID question.
Are there any other essay tips and tricks that you can share with us?
Well, I would say parents are listening. Please don't rate them. Please don't rate them for your students. Please. Please don't edit them to the point where your 17-year-old's voice is no longer there. The admissions committee is looking for an essay written by a 17-year-old. They know there's going to be some mistakes in there, but they want to hear that kid's voice. So if you're a parent, you can support your kid by helping them be confident, be positive. Tell them they've got this. Tell them it's an opportunity for the committee, the school, to know who they are outside of this application. Because one thing that some people mistake for on these essay questions is they have to write about some award that they got that's already been listed on the application, maybe in 2 different spots. Really what they're looking for is to know something about you that they don't already know from the application. You can help your kid reflect a little bit. You can help them brainstorm, but don't tell them what to write. Don't say, I think Princeton's looking for this characteristic. Don't do that. Maybe tell them what you think they're good at or what their strengths are. And they may or may not agree with you, but that's how you can be helpful to them. With editing, parents, listen to your kid and what do they want you to look at the essay for? You may have your idea of what you want to do and have that big pen out and, or you're on Google Doc and you're doing all your Google Share there and you're editing. What does your son, your daughter want you to look at the essay for? They may just want a thumbs up. They may want some light, did I put all my commas in? But don't just go and edit it. Really find out what they want from you. Yeah, you're there to be positive and supportive. And then for students, I'd say, make sure you're answering the prompt. don't just go off and tell them about yourself, but please tie it into the prompt. I think those are probably the two biggest mistakes, is not answering the question, and the other mistake being talking about something that they've already know about you.
So how can parents manage their own anxiety? Because for me, if I'm not going to over edit and put it in my voice and make it perfect, then if they don't get accepted, I blame myself. Like, I could have done more. As a parent, you just want your kid to succeed and you want to help them. But sometimes by helping them, you're really hurting them. So how do you manage your own anxiety around that?
Well, I think just knowing that what's best for your child is that they're turning in what really is their work, their voice. And the flip side of that is if you're heavily editing, if you have tons of input and they get in, how much did you contribute to that too? Really, if you can just step back, let them do this, they've got this. And if you're uncomfortable with that responsibility, if your child, if your senior is coming to you and saying, can you look this over, and you're uncomfortable with that, I know that made me anxious. I'm an English major, English psychology major. And that made me very nervous to, I was like, oh my God, I am going to have to look at this thing, and this could make or break him getting into my alma mater.
Right, right.
Yes,
this is everything is weighed on this.
In fact, I have a funny story about that. My son, it was too much for me at one point, and I was working a lot, and he had to write an essay for one of his schools, my alma mater, Villanova. And it was really important to me that he got in there, of course. I mean, I may be an IEC, but I'm a mom too. I had his dad, my husband, look at the essay and sent it in. My little tip here is, if you can't do it, maybe someone else can, like your spouse or even an English teacher. They sent it in, and then I looked at it later because I couldn't resist. I mean, that's just me. I couldn't resist. I knew it was in, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a look at it. And the first sentence was missing a punctuation mark, and I nearly died. I said to my husband, how could you have missed this? I was just so upset. And he got in. I mean, it was, okay, let's put this in perspective. The admissions committee knows that this is from an 18-year-old kid. It was in his voice. He missed the punctuation. So did my husband, and he got in. We're all human, and we don't want to lose our voice in this. If you can't handle the anxiety from being an editor, hand it off to someone that can. And if no one in the family can, English teachers are usually more than happy to look over after school, look over your student's application. They know your student's writing probably a little bit better too. That's a great way to know that they're in good hands, but step away.
Would this be a service you would provide?
Absolutely. I am another set of eyes. We usually don't recommend more than 2 people looking through it because, again, that's another way for things to get lost. The instances where I've been more involved in an essay, the parent was not. So I was sort of that other person. And I was more involved in the brainstorming process where the student was very stuck. Great application and a great writer, just really stuck. And so we did some exercises. I have tons of fun things that we can do to just get them going. But I really step back when it comes to the actual editing. It's more just to inspire them, kind of like what I'm encouraging parents to do. One resource, if you're a little stuck with writing, is the WOW Writing Workshop. It's online. They have a Facebook page, and they just have little tidbits to help you get going, and you can get involved in that or as much or as little as you want. If I work with a student, I've got little fill-in-the-blank type of things to help them with brainstorming, little word games, that kind of thing that are very non-threatening. And we've had a lot of success with that. Usually once you know what you're going to write about, it comes, Mm-hmm. And I always tell my students, this isn't the time to break out your thesaurus, because again, it's almost like the editing issue. That's not your voice. If you're using a word that you've never used before, that's not you. And really, I can't tell you how many times admissions committees have said, we know when they've done that. We know when they pulled that thesaurus out or whatever. So I'm here to kind of help them keep it real and help them speak in their own voice about something that will make them desirable to the committees.
Yeah, and it sounds like the students on their own are worthy. They're worthy of an admission. They don't need their parents to write it for them. They don't need fancy words or a thesaurus. It's enough. You're enough just the way you are. And that's what they're looking for, is your authentic self. And that's enough.
Absolutely.
And the kids maybe don't feel confident in that. And that's where the parents come in and just kind of rah-rah behind them and say, you are enough. You are unique. They want you for you.
Absolutely. College admission has gotten kind of crazy, and there's a lot of pressure just in society about college admissions, and there's family pressures, there's high school pressures. Kids don't share where they're applying with other kids because they don't want that getting out. They need every advantage they can. I mean, it's just a whole culture of pressure. And so as a parent, if you can just be positive and let them know that they got it, they can do this, that's the best thing that you can really do for them. That essay, for some reason, has so much pressure built into it just because of where society is with college admissions. And so if you can make it something doable for them that they feel confident about, they're just going to be so much better off.
So what about the letters of recommendation? Any tips on that?
Absolutely. I guess a lot of kids now, a lot of seniors are probably in maybe their second week of school. It really depends on where they are in the country. I think here locally, we're in week 2, getting ready to start week 2, if that sounds right. Right now, when you are next at school, please ask your teachers for recommendations. And so one thing to think about this is, who knows you best? If this is a new teacher your senior year and you've only had them a couple weeks or a month, that's probably not the right person. I'm not saying they couldn't write you one, but the best recommendations come from the teachers that have had time to get to know you. Find out from your application what they need from you. Do they need 2, maybe one from a STEM class and one from a humanities? Maybe they need one from a teacher and one from a coach or somebody that knew you personally from an activity at school. So once you know what they need, then go through and think about the teachers that you've known over the years. Even if you don't have them this year, who knows you? Because they're going to write the most personal recommendation for you. And if you ask now, you're more likely to have a polite of course from your teacher, because if you wait too long, they're going to want to do it for you, but they're going to be a little annoyed. They're going to have a lot of other people they're already writing for. So you want to ask them now and give them lots of time. Ask them personally. If you get a good response, follow it up with an email to the school email with a little resume. They know you, but just so they have a little guide of, okay, how many years were they in debate with a due date? Give them a time frame that you need it by. Most of them are happy to do that if you give them enough notice. If you're applying early, you really need to get on this. What I would say to you is also have a plan B, because for whatever reason, we have a personal experience with this as well. My son had a teacher that was going to write his recommendation who knew him for 4 years of high school. I mean, what better person? 4 years of the same subject in a subject he got an A in, and the person he knew most personally. Early on, asked him in the summer through an email, and 1 month into school, unfortunately, the teacher passed away. So my son had to really think hard, and really it was like a big block. Now who am I going to ask? So what I would say to you is you're going to have your first choice, but things do come up, and God, I hope it's not something like that, but things do come up. The teacher may not be able to do it. They may have so much going on with online teaching and personal circumstances. Have a plan B. Most people are going to have a school counselor recommendation also, so you want to check in with the school counselor about that, especially if you're applying early.
How many letters should the student get?
Well, good safe number is 2. Some schools require one, some say it's optional. Again, optional means do it. Some schools require two, and then if they're applying to a certain major, they might need one being very specific. But that's why if you know where you're applying, you really need to find out the specific requirements of your school. But you are pretty safe if you've got two, not counting your school counselor. So two recommendations plus your school counselor is more than enough. And you know what? If they only require one, send them both in. Send them all in. I mean, obviously don't be annoying and send 6 or 5.
Read that your parents wrote.
Right. Yeah, so now's the time. Come up with that plan A and plan B.
Before we go any further, what's the best way for somebody to get in contact with you, Diane?
My email is almamateradvising@gmail.com. I check it several times a day. I tend to be a little anal about that, but I do check it all the time. That's a great direct way to get in touch with me. If you don't want to be in touch with me initially, you just want to kind of check me out. I have a Facebook page under Alma Mater Advising. I also have a website, almamateradvising.com. I have photos on my website of some of the most recent schools that I've toured. One of my jobs is to tour schools when you can't. That's one of the things my husband loves about my job is that when we travel, wherever we are, I look up to see where the nearest colleges are, and I go talk to students on campus. If I can catch a admissions lecture, I sit in on one. I grab newspapers from the school, and I bring them home. And they're your resources if you want. Touring is one of my favorite things to do. And so I have a lot of tour information on my Facebook page mostly, and then some on my website.
Okay, we will include links to all of this in our show notes. Was there any other advice that you could share with us?
The fifth thing that I wanted to share, kind of obvious, but let me just state it, which is really we just started senior year. And it would be good if you're a parent or if you're a student listening, grandparent, have your senior evaluate their current schedule. I know this is sort of drop ad time too. Really take a look at your schedule. Understand what your circumstances are. Are you virtual? Did you sign up for all these things, these 4 AP classes, thinking you were going to be in-person lecture, and now you're online? And does that make sense for you? Look at your circumstances and figure out, does that make sense? Does the level of intensity in my classes, the rigor, make sense for my circumstances? I know some kids are going to be feeling a little pressure this year because junior year spring may have been a little bit of a bust for them. And what I want to say to them is that it's okay, that admissions staff understand that. They know that last spring really was a bust. Some schools were not very good about getting their courses online. Some schools were. Kids didn't get to travel to, hop on flights and travel to schools they wanted to visit junior year, because that's a big year to go visit is junior year. If you had a tough time junior year with your grades and they slid, well, number one, you can talk about that in the COVID essay. Number two, you have a chance now to take a look at your senior grades and your senior classes and figure out if it makes sense. If you're applying early, they're not really going to see much of your senior year right now probably till you've already been accepted. They can always rescind, but that doesn't happen that often. So this is probably more important if you're not applying early right now to take a look at that. And if your fall semester is going to be really important because junior year didn't go so well, don't be hard on yourself. I mean, yes, challenge yourself, please. Schools want to see that, but be realistic.
As a final takeaway, if you can give us just one bit of advice for the parents and one bit of advice for a student, funnel it down into one or two points, what would that be?
I have a takeaway. Hire someone like her or another. My God.
For sure. That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
If you didn't get that as a takeaway, I'm telling you, that's your takeaway.
Getting Diane on the payroll.
Yeah, my God.
I mean, obviously, this is something I believe in. I'm very passionate about it. I've started doing it when I realized how important it was to have somebody that offers my services. And what's nice about my services, it's very much tailored to you. No two students have ever been alike in terms of what I've provided. I mean, I've had situations where we have one meeting and we're around the dining room table or we're on Zoom, and the parents and the student feel so good about where they're at, and they realize, wow, we're doing everything right. And we really don't need you, but we needed you for this hour because we didn't realize that. We actually are doing everything okay. And then there's the other extreme where people are lost. And I'm here for those people to help them master this. It's a journey. I would say if you need organizations, if your organization is not a good skill for you, an IEC can help with that. We use platforms to help our students stay organized. You can send me an email at almamateradvising@gmail.com, or you can check me out at my website, almamateradvising.com.
What a wealth of information. That's fantastic.
This has been amazing.
I hope the listeners find it helpful. I mean, my purpose was to really let people know there is a way to shine during this pandemic and use the situation in a good way to help people and to help people feel a little less anxious about this process.
What about you, Cheryl?
Yeah, I didn't know that you could have that kind of help. I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there that didn't know someone like you existed. I think it's fantastic. And yes, if I had to do it all over again, I would definitely go this route.
Yeah, I didn't know about it either. It's funny how this business oftentimes is word of mouth. So I'm hoping that this helps a little bit get the word out a little bit more widely that this kind of service does exist. And right now, with being virtual, I can literally help people in any state. Before the pandemic hit, I mean, obviously my clientele tended to be in Virginia, but now I'm helping people all over.
Can you say what is it, IEAC?
IECA. So I'm an IEC, which is an independent educational consultant. And then IECA is our association.
Okay.
Yes. And so if you are going to work with someone that's an IEC, that's just another little check that you might want to look for, because we have to apply to that and go through an application process to be accepted. They don't just take anybody. You do want to look for that credential that person belongs to the association. And I will say, just as an aside, the guy that did the Varsity Blues scandal was not one of us. Case closed.
I think a lot of parents now see a light at the end of the tunnel for this whole process. I think this has been fantastic.
Happy to hear that.
We really appreciate you coming on, Diane. We want to remind our listeners to check out our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Instagram page. And thanks again, Diane. Thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you,
All
Carol
right.
and Cheryl. It was a real pleasure.
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Carol and Cheryl, thank you. Carol and Cheryl, thank you.